My name is Lissa, and I'm 65 years old. I've lived alone in this quiet house in Northern Virginia for nearly 7 years now. My children are grown both on opposite coasts with lives of their own, and I've gotten used to the peace, the stillness, the gentle rhythm of mornings with tea, and evenings with a book. I thought I was content. Maybe I was until last weekend. It was raining when he showed up. Daniel, my late husband's friend from his university days, I hadn't seen him in well over a decade. We kept in touch here and there, holiday cards, an occasional birthday message, but nothing too personal. So when he called and said he'd be driving through Virginia and asked if we could catch up, I said yes. Without really thinking twice, I offered to meet at a coffee shop nearby, but he surprised me by asking if he could stay the night. Said all the hotels nearby were booked due to some wine festival. I hesitated, but then agreed. I had a perfectly clean guest room, and he was an old friend. It felt innocent enough. When he arrived, the rain was falling in sheets. I opened the door, and there he was, older. Of course, more silver in his beard. But that same easy smile. He brought in his overnight bag and the scent of fresh rain with him. We stood in the foyer for a moment, awkwardly shaking off the years with polite small talk, but soon found our way into the kitchen. I made tea. He poured a splash of whiskey into his. We talked for hours, sitting at the kitchen island, about my kids, his recent retirement, the places he traveled. I hadn't had a conversation like that in a long time, one without hurry or purpose. Just a flow of memories, quiet laughter, and shared silences. At one point, he reached across the counter to tuck a strand of my hair behind my ear. I didn't pull away, but I didn't respond either, just looked at him. That moment passed, and we didn't mention it. Around 11, I showed him to the guest room. It's a cozy space, clean linens, a small reading lamp, and a window that faces the backyard. He thanked me with a warm smile, one that lingered for just a second too long. I said, "Good night," closed my bedroom door behind me, and stood there for a moment, hand on the knob, heart strangely awake. I don't know what woke me at midnight. Maybe it was the wind tapping branches against the window, or the unfamiliar presence of someone else in the house. I reached for the glass of water beside my bed and froze. There were soft footsteps in the hallway. Not hurried, not sneaky, just deliberate. I slid out of bed and opened the door quietly. The hallway was dark save for the faint light spilling from under the guest room door, but it wasn't coming from a lamp, it was flickering candlelight. My heart beat a little faster. I padded toward the door and gently pushed it open. Daniel was sitting on the edge of the bed, a single candle lit on the nightstand. He looked up at me, startled at first, then softened. "I couldn't sleep," he said. "Too many thoughts." I stepped inside, unsure of why I hadn't just gone back to bed. "Are you okay?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He nodded. "Just being here again in this house. It reminds me of him, of your laugh, of the way things used to feel." I didn't say anything. I just stood there, the candle casting shadows on the walls and across his face. "I'm sorry if I crossed a line earlier," he said quietly, looking down. "With your hair, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." I stepped closer. "You didn't," I replied. He looked up. I saw something in his eyes, then tiredness. Yes, but also something tender, vulnerable, familiar. And I realized, standing there in my old robe with my gray-streaked hair and my bare feet on the hardwood floor, I wasn't afraid. I wasn't confused. I just didn't know what was supposed to happen next. That's when he reached out and gently touched my hand, and everything I thought I understood about loneliness shifted. I didn't pull my hand away. For a moment, neither of us spoke. His thumb rested lightly on the back of my hand, his touch warm and steady. The candle flickered between us, casting a soft amber glow that made the room feel like it was floating outside of time. There was no past or future in that moment, just the quiet breath between us and the thrum of something unspoken. I sat down beside him on the edge of the bed. "It's strange," I said, my voice barely louder than the rain outside. "How quickly silence can start to feel like company." Daniel smiled gently, not breaking eye contact. "It's not strange to me," he said. "I think some silences are earned." We stayed like that, our hands barely touching. There was something comforting about the weight of his presence, something I hadn't realized I'd been missing until it was right there beside me. I'd grown used to the echo of my own footsteps, the solitary rituals of widowhood. But now I was noticing things like the softness in his voice or the way he leaned in just slightly when he listened. He broke the quiet. Carol, I didn't come here expecting anything, I swear. But being here with you again, it stirred things I didn't expect to feel. I exhaled slowly, unsure of what I was feeling. I looked down at our hands still connected. I don't know what I expected either, but whatever this is, it doesn't feel wrong. He nodded. No, it doesn't. We didn't kiss. We didn't even move closer. Instead, we talked for hours. He told me about his divorce 10 years ago, how it was quiet, uneventful, how the love had just faded into the background one day, like an old song. He talked about his regrets, the things he wished he'd said, the way he sometimes missed the version of himself that used to dream big. I told him about the first few years after Tom passed, how the house had felt too big, how I started sleeping on one side of the bed, out of habit. I told him about my fears about aging, about disappearing slowly into the wallpaper of life, about wondering if I had already had my last new beginning. He listened like no one had in years. Somewhere between stories and silences, we both shifted back onto the bed, our backs against the headboard, our shoulders gently touching. There was no urgency between us, just warmth. At one point, I leaned my head onto his shoulder and he rested his cheek lightly on my hair. I closed my eyes. In that moment, I didn't feel alone. I didn't feel like a woman trying to reclaim something lost. I just felt present, safe, and surprisingly alive. Eventually, we both grew quiet, not from exhaustion, but from comfort. I stood up slowly and he followed, walking me to the hallway. Just before I turned back toward my room, he reached for my hand again. Thank you for letting me in tonight, he said, and I knew he didn't mean just into the house. I squeezed his hand gently, smiled, and walked back to bed. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't fall asleep to the hum of loneliness. I fell asleep thinking about the way his voice softened when he said my name. The next morning, sunlight filtered gently through the kitchen window, warming the countertop where 2 mugs sat still drying. From the night before, I stood at the stove waiting for the kettle to whistle, wrapped in a soft sweater and my thoughts. The quiet of morning felt different now, less empty, more expectant. Daniel walked in, hair still damp from a shower, wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. He looked younger somehow in the soft light. Or maybe it was just the way he smiled when our eyes met. Smells like coffee, he said, his voice rough with sleep. Ta, I replied, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. But I can make some if you prefer. He shook his head and sat at the kitchen table. Tea's perfect. There was a pause, but not an uncomfortable one. We were both thinking about the night before, though neither of us said anything at first. The memory of the candle-lit room lingered between us. Unspoken, but understood, I sat down across from him, crafted my mug. Did you sleep at all? I asked softly. He smiled. A little, but I didn't mind being awake. Neither did I, but I didn't say that aloud. We spent the morning as if the night had never happened, chatting about music, about the birds in the backyard, about an old movie we both remembered fondly, but under it all, there was a tenderness in the way we spoke to each other. Every look held a little more meaning. Every word felt like it had more weight. Around noon, he offered to help clean the garden patio, an excuse perhaps to stay a little longer. I said yes. We spent an hour sweeping leaves, scrubbing the glass table, and laughing over a stubborn wasp that wouldn't leave Daniel alone. At one point, I caught myself watching him. The way he moved, the way he paused to admire a bloom, the way he smiled when he thought I wasn't looking. And then he looked up and caught me staring. Carol, he said, brushing his hands on his jeans. I need to ask you something. I froze a little. My heart started to thud against my chest. Would it be strange, he continued, if I told you I don't want to leave just yet? I looked at him for a moment before answering. No, I said, it wouldn't be strange at all. He stepped closer, slowly, respectfully, and reached for my hand again. I don't know what this is becoming or where it's headed, but being here with you, it feels like something I want to understand with you. There was no pressure in his words, just quiet sincerity. I nodded, and we stood there for a while, his hand wrapped around mine, the warm breeze brushing past us. Later that afternoon, we found ourselves sitting on the living room couch looking through an old photo album I hadn't touched in years. Pictures of Tom, of our kids. Of us when we were younger, I felt a wave of emotion stir inside me, but it didn't feel painful. It felt human. Daniel put a hand on my back, not to comfort or to fix anything, but just to be there. It grounded me. I looked at him and smiled through misty eyes. This house has held so much, I whispered. Joy, loss, love. I didn't think there was room for anything new. There always is, he replied, his voice just above a whisper. Sometimes we just need to open the door again. And somehow I knew I had. That evening we sat on the porch as the sun began to set, casting long golden rays across the lawn. The wind had softened the birds, quieted, and the hush of twilight wrapped itself gently around us. I brought out 2 glasses of wine, one red, one white. He smiled as I handed him his, and we clinked them softly without a word. The silence was different now. It wasn't about absence. It was about presence. His mine. Something between us that no longer needed to be explained. I used to watch sunsets like this alone, I said quietly, gazing out past the trees. Sometimes I talked to Tom, not out loud, but just in here I tapped my chest. I'd tell him about the day, about the garden, about the things I wished he hadn't missed. Daniel looked over at me with those warm, steady eyes. Do you still sometimes? I nodded, but less often lately. He didn't press, just reached for my hand and held it. I don't want to rush anything, he said after a while. And I don't expect answers right away. But I need you to know, I felt more like myself these past 2 days than I have in years. I turned to him, searching his face for hesitation, for doubt. I found none. You don't make me feel younger, Daniel, I said, smiling faintly. You make me feel real. And I hadn't realized how much I missed that. He leaned in slowly, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. Our lips met gently. No urgency, no fireworks. Just a warm, honest connection that settled into something quietly beautiful. It wasn't a kiss that promised forever. It was one that said, I see you, I'm here. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead lightly against mine, and we both laughed just a little, the kind of laugh that releases something old and opens the door to something new. Later, as the stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, we moved back inside. I offered him the guest room again, though something unspoken passed between us. Not an expectation, but a question, a possibility. He stood in the hallway looking at the door to the guest room, then back at me. Where would you like me tonight? He asked softly. I took a moment before answering. Not out of uncertainty, but out of reverence for what it meant. Come with me, I said. That night we didn't rush. We undressed, not just from our clothes, but from the years of fear, hesitation, and loneliness. We talked more, held each other, more slept with the kind of closeness that says, I trust you, I'm not afraid to be seen anymore. In the morning, he made breakfast, scrambled eggs, and toast. I watched him from the doorway, still in my robe, and thought, I never imagined this would happen at my age, but maybe that's the point. Love doesn't follow a timeline. Sometimes it waits, sometimes it circles back, and sometimes it shows up during a rainstorm, asks to stay the night, and changes everything. He left 2 days later, but not without a plan to return. We didn't call it anything. What we were building, we just promised not to close the door again, and I haven't. Not to him, not to myself. Not anymore.